I think let's start letting people in, right?
Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good day. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes so people have some time to join. Hi, Jemima. I see your hand is raised. Is that
Yes,
an accidental?
yes, my hand is raised. How have you been?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. So mine is just a humble request that if possible, can you the meeting so that for those of us who have issues with the internet, they might follow up on the conversation later on. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Jemima. I think we should be good to start. Yes. So just to let everyone know, we're already recording this. And usually what our comms team does, and they're very good at this, is to right after the webinar, send an email to everyone who's registered with the recording and also with any presentations or notes that we may have used. And we'll check with the speakers if you're all okay for us to send these to the participants. So that has already been taken care of, Jemima, but thank you for reminding us. All right. I know that it's a busy day today. For some reason, everybody has their webinar today. I think it's the only day that some of us had in the next 2 weeks, right before the ILC, which means that the audience is sort of, dispersed around many webinars. And I think the StreetNet one is happening right now as well. So, Myra, thank you especially for being here. I am Saloni. I am the digitalization and platformization specialist at Vigo, and I work with the organization, with the ORB team, ORB team, which is the Organizing and Representation Program. This is the third in the series of webinars, and we've been doing these through March, April, and now in May. Uh, in March, we talked about the overlaps between informal work, own account work, platform work, and why this is critical as we strategize towards unified workers' voice towards the ILC. In April, we heard very specifically workers' demands, platform workers' demands, but also other workers' demands, say own account workers. And a lot of these were around protections for all workers, regardless of their employment classification, an expansion of occupational safety and health, or OSH, through the convention, issues around account deactivation as well as automated decision making. These demands I know are now being drafted as very specific amendments, which is in relation to the proposed convention on platform work. WIGO as well has submitted our amendments to the ITUC. I know the Global Platform Workers Solidarity Project has a few amendments, and as do some of you on this call. Through these two webinars in March and April, as well as many sort of formal and informal conversations, consultations over the last 2 months, it's been made clear that we also need to center gender more clearly. Um, and sorry, before I go on, I also want to point out that interpretation is available. Sorry, I missed that. There is a globe icon at the bottom of your screens, and you can select the channel that you are most comfortable with. There is English, Spanish, and French for you to pick from. And as I said before, we are recording. We are recording this to be made available to others, but the chat function is also open for you to come in and speak. Yeah, so going back to why this conversation is critical, we've seen that the platform work convention is disappointingly gender neutral. It does not recognize women's unique experiences in the platform economy. It does not, acknowledge them. It does not, account for them. And we're struggling around how to incorporate this and make the convention more gender responsive. So we're going to talk about how we tackle this today. We also need to keep in mind that alongside the Platform Work Convention, there is also other critical spaces at the ILC. There is a recurrent discussion on social dialogue and tripartism, and a general discussion on advancing gender transformative agendas in the world of work. Participants here today are going to be, spreading ourselves across these three conversations. So at the webinar today, we want to try and see how we bring these three strands together. And this is so that we can inform each other and strengthen our common demands across these three topics. And at the heart of this, we recognize that there is a need for gender-based inclusions to be made more strongly across the ILC. So we want to talk about what is at stake, what are the issues we are facing, how to look at them specifically as we strategize, and also to finally acknowledge that this is in the context of growing political backlash against gender rights globally. And that's what makes this conversation very critical. So I now turn to two of our speakers. We have two speakers first who will be talking to us about what is at stake and trying to help us start connecting these conversations. So first we will have Giulia Massobrio from the ITUC. Giulia coordinates the Equality Department. And then following Giulia, we will have Maira Vannuchi from StreetNet International, and Maira works in the worker education program as the manager. Both of you have 10 minutes each, and then following which we will hear from our final three speakers. So I will hand it over to you now, Giulia.
Thank you very much, and good day, everyone. I hope you hear me well, and you also see my screen. Wonderful. As Salonia said, I am Giulia. I work in the Equality Department, which is directed by Paola Simonetti, and I will be part of the team at the ILO conference in the general discussion on gender equality. So what we wanted to do here today, as Saloni said, is rather than giving you an overall take of what we will fight for in that general discussion, we're really looking at the link between the general discussion on gender equality and the platform convention, so and the broader digital transition. So I also hope I can, voila. So I had this tradition when I started my career at the ILO in Turin in the training center. My chief was saying, you need to ask yourself, what's the one idea you want your participants to leave the room with? So I'm doing a spoiler alert, and I'm already telling you that the key takeaway for me and also for us in the general discussion on gender when it comes to digital is that if we want the digital transition to promote gender equality, we need to be deliberate. Otherwise, the digital transition will leave women behind. Guess what? Also the same for the climate transition, same for demographic transition. So I think this idea is really what holds the overall PowerPoint that I prepared for you today. So having said that, first of all, what's the framework? No? So I said I will not dive into all the points that we will fight for in the general discussion, but I think I need you to give a sense of what the discussion will be about. So we will have 3 questions. The first one will be on the structural barriers to advance gender equality in the world of work. The second one, where digitalization comes in, is on transitions, and it highlights 3 transitions: demographic, environmental, and technological. And then it looks at the priority actions. Okay, so this is the overall framework of the general discussion. I don't think you need me to tell you that it's a very sensitive discussion. That is the context we are, you know it better than me. That context of global backlash has been reflected directly in the ILO. But what the ITUC wants to do in this conference is really to focus on concrete policies, on advancing what the ILO and its constituents can and should do on gender equality overall. And today we will talk about digital. So what's the context? The context is that our world of work is more and more digital, and that, as I said before, if we are not deliberate, if we are not intentional, what the digital labor market does is just to reflect and deepen those gender inequalities that we see in the analogic labor market. And one element that is strongly highlighted by the ILO report preparing for this discussion is the digital gender divide, among many elements. But here it comes the problem of lack of access and use of the internet, the 300 million fewer women owning a smartphone, the much lower number of tertiary students going into ITC, informatics, technology and communication, and women not or less present in studies and so not having skills in science, technology, engineering, and math fields, which are the most valued one in the digital economy, the best paid ones also, obviously. So this is the context in a nutshell. So what are the challenges? First and foremost, I think the key message is that there will be job losses because of the automation and because of AI and generative AI codifying some occupations. And guess what? Female are the ones whose jobs are more exposed to this automation. Why? Because female, because of occupational segregation and discrimination, are more present in lower skilled jobs. So for example, business administration, clerical support, and those jobs are easier to be automated, to be codified, and to be substituted by generative AI. So it's almost double than men in terms of being exposed to my job to be automated. Second point, and I mentioned it before, algorithms reproduce discrimination and occupational segregation. Algorithms are defined, codified by human beings, and those human beings bring stereotypes with them, and algorithms take their data from the internet, mainly from databases that are usually filled with gender biased information, so that they just reproduce them. And an example that we see a lot is, for example, AI used for job evaluations and CV selections in a male-dominated sector, where what AI will do will be to do a short list prioritizing males, because what it sees is most males. So these are examples of what these challenges mean in practice. Third challenge is occupational health and safety. These digital jobs are usually promoted as ways to increase work-life balance, but we know that digital work can also come with blurred boundaries between working time and non-working time, intensified workload. So on the right, you can see this is data from the ITUC, where we see that 78, meaning 4 out of 5 women performing microtask platform work at night or during evenings. Why? Because platform cater to global North business hour, and women doing those jobs are mainly in the global South. So they have to work at night in order to respond to daily requests from the global North. And then gender-based violence and harassment that emerge as a growing concern, such as digital harassment, cyberbullying, and online stalking. So I picked stories. We have been gathering stories from the platform discussion, and I think they, at least to me, they're very helpful to make this real. So the first story, and I picked fantasy names, but this story is real, and it comes from Argentina, from a care worker that is booked through an app. And she says that the app says, set your own rate. So I chose 10,000 pesos, but I have no booking, it's just silence. So my friends start telling me, you have to lower it, otherwise you don't work. So I did, and again, until I realized that I'm not choosing my price, I'm lowering my worth. So this is one example. We have many examples in terms of care work. The second one is domestic work, cleaning. So this example comes from Pakistan, and Miriam says, my job depends on one thing, 5 stars. She always needs to have a 5 stars rating. What by review means that I disappear on the app. So when clients shout or demand more for free, I stay silent, because saying no means no work. And those stars for me don't mean recognition, they are a warning. And she says, this isn't dignity, it's fear called flexibility. And the last example, I found it on The Guardian. It's an article that was published in February, and it's about Murmu. She's from India, and she's a content moderator. So she's very young, 26, and she picked this job because she didn't have to migrate. She could do it from her village, from her home. The point is that the job is on content moderator, so she's supposed to classify content that the automated system flags as possible violation of platform rules. So on average, each day, she views up to 800 videos of images of violence, abuse, raping, harm, killings, abuse on minors, to judge and to train the algorithm to recognize them and to avoid publishing them. And so there is the opinion of a sociologist on this article, and I left the link in the PowerPoint, saying that in terms of risk, content moderation belongs in the category of dangerous work comparable to any lethal industry. So these three examples, and we have many more of riders, of many types of workers in the platform and digital economy, but I think they speak at least to my heart in terms of what it means in practice for those women. So what are our recommendations coming to the conference, coming to what we want to fight for? First of all, we want to have a say in how algorithms are designed, deployed, and its governance, so that we embed gender equality through social dialogue. And here the link, obvious link with the other discussion on social dialogue and collective bargaining. Address occupational segregation, as we said, it is reproduced through AI. Invest in lifelong learning strategy to expand women access to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, AI, and digital skills, so that they can be in those new jobs that are created in the technological transition, and they can be in decision-making roles in those jobs. Having policies on OSH, occupational health and safety, and gender-based violence and harassment. We do have a hook in Convention 190, so we have we can refer to the convention, but obviously it must be developed at the national level, and we also have good examples already. As I said before, we need women in decision-making roles and processes, defining how technology and AI should work. Otherwise, their priorities and needs will not be reflected. This is a broader issue on women in leadership, but it does reflect also here. And for all that to happen, we need to strengthen labor market institutions and social dialogue. When it comes to what we would like the office to do, is very much linked to what I've just said. So support constituents, governments, employers' organization, workers' organization in developing frameworks, regulation, policy to have gender equality at the center of AI. Request tech companies to invest in prevention when it comes to OSH, when it comes to gender-based violence and harassment, and use social dialogue and any participatory tool, so participation of workers in the management of algorithms. That means rights to information, for example, on how the algorithm is designed, how it works, how the rates, for example, of riders work, right to participation, so to participate in those decisions, and right to human review. So when I'm fired or suspended by an app, to be able to have an explanation and a review from a human being. So this is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say. And again, my main takeaway is being deliberate about this. And I think we have a lot of tools. I have to say the ILO has been impressive in the last, I would say, 6 months in terms of producing research on each and every point that we will fight for in the conference. And there is very nice research, I will put it in the chat, on this topic from the gender perspective. And also the link with psychosocial risk. So I have to say, in terms of tools, we have a lot of good tools, data, materials that we can use. And I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And obviously any question is welcome.
Thank you, Giulia. That was very comprehensive. And I think the list of recommendations or demands you're taking to the offices resonates with some of us. There is a group consolidated by the Global Platform Workers Solidarity Project, which has been putting together women's demands specific to the ILC. And a lot of what you said reflects there. I will pick up on one thing you said, which I'm sure Maira has also picked up on, which is nothing about us without us. And I know that StreetNet International has been very, focused on this idea. So Maira, turning to you, I know you come from a very specific lens of street vendors, but to say that these issues are not disconnected from street vendors and other women workers in the informal economy. I also know that International has been taking a very strong approach towards the social dialogue conversation. So if you could tie together these ideas for us in terms of platform work, social dialogue, and what StreetNet's strategy is going forward at the ILC.
Thanks, Saloni. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Well, I will speak a bit about social dialogue and how we are prioritizing this on this ILC, but also I will refer to the fact that the Platform Workers Convention is something that's really, we are really paying attention to, understanding that from the principle that informal economy workers, they're all in the same boat. So when we do some regulations and standards that will recognize them as workers, create standards, and make social protection inclusive, prove that there is like a connection between the big companies and the workers. All this matters to us very much. So we are supporting in solidarity this year and sending our strengths to be there. We will be there also. But I will speak about social dialogue now, because it is something that we understand that if we don't speak about inclusive social dialogue, about recognizing farm economy workers as workers and making sure they are at the table, we will not have the strength that we need to decide on anything from now on. So I will share my screen just a second. Can you see it?
Perfect, Maira.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so we are speaking about a world of work that includes street vendors and informal economy workers in decision-making spaces. And just for who might not know us, StreetNet International is a global alliance founded in 2022, represents street and market vendors all around the world. We have 62 mostly national organizations from 56 countries in all regions, all continents. And we have 68% of our constituency is composed of women. So we define street vending as a women, majority of women sector. And we also have been mapping that 1/3 of our constituency are composed by youth. So the key context here is that when speaking about social dialogue, informal economy workers represent approximately 60% of the world's workforce, accounting for roughly 2 billion workers, according to the latest research. And these workers, they operate primarily without legal protections, formal contracts, or adequate social security cover. And they remain largely excluded from traditional dialogue spaces. Well, street and market vendors among those workers, as poor and self-account workers, they are among the most affected by exclusion, informality, and lack of representation. And there is this issue that majority of street vendors are women. So the first thing to say looks obvious, but might not be always, that we are workers. Street and market vendors are workers. Informal economy workers are workers. Street vendors support local economies and food systems, create employment and opportunities, strengthen urban social life and distribution networks. And so they are legitimate social dialogue actors. The challenges that street vendors face are the first place, lack of legitimacy and recognition as workers. They face harassment and criminalization caused by the lack of recognition. So they face forced evictions, confiscations of goods. They are excluded from social protection and labor rights. They like being part of consultation in urban planning, licensing, market infrastructure decisions, public space management. And as they are not recognized as workers, they are often unable to form formal trade unions. They form mostly associations, and therefore prevented from joining trade union confederations as full members. They many times are part of trade union centers, but not as full members, not with voting rights, not as part of the leadership of trade union centers many times, so cannot really take the voice from informal economy workers in the most important positions. And also they are prevented from taking part in collective bargaining. So this is like something that is a lack of freedom of associations as workers. So it's what makes like difficult to have a say in decisions that affect their lives and work. So this is, in general, a serious issue facing the world of work. So social dialogue, we understand, is essential for democratic labor governance and social justice. But a large portion of the global workforce, in fact, the majority, is not currently recognized as workers. So, excuse me, is not recognized either within the world's representative institutions or by governments. And it's not sitting at the table. It's not being seen as part of the global workforce of unionized workers that could be standing up to the advancing of policies that roll back workers' rights. And here we include also women's rights. So we understand that this has to change, and inclusive social dialogue is the pathway. We need workers in the informal economy to be recognized as workers and to take their rightful place. That is, they are an important part of the working class and the driving force behind the global economy. So structural change for inclusive participation, right? So here is where we are speaking about right-based formalization that should be a tool for inclusion. So it means that in a right-based formalization, we would have inclusive dialogue that would require recognition that who works is a worker, freedom of association, so they would be able to form trade unions, the registration of informal workforce, the government registration, classification of their occupations, and then access to labor rights, inclusion of representatives of workers in the informal economy in social dialogue forums, and a trade union movement that draws its strength from these workers and not that remains somehow separated. And we also defend very strongly the support for social and solidarity economy models, because through cooperatives and many kind of mutual help groups in many sense, the collectiveness among informal economy workers is built. It's like the, let's say, the bond that makes it possible to build the unions among informal economy workers many times. So our demands, we want, first of all, to recognize street vendors organizations as legitimate social partners. We are not part of the negotiation tables of the social dialogue. To institutionalize inclusive dialogue, so permanent platforms at various levels of governance where informal economy workers can be included. Ensure participation in urban governance, so whenever there is decision among use of public space and the livelihood of street vendors, we should be participating. Protect work, so end of evictions, violence, confiscations, arbitrary penalties. Promote a rights-based formalization, protect livelihoods, labor rights, income security. Strengthen data collection, improve visibility, evidence-based policymaking, support capacity building and alliances, promote gender-responsive dialogue. So ensure women's vendors are represented in leadership and negotiations. And this is a key point for this conversation today, because we have to understand that as StreetNet, that what we have to demand from the world of work, from governments, from state, is that the social dialogue is inclusive. But how will we ensure that women are taking part on these negotiations? So we promote very strongly in StreetNet the leadership training for women. We are all over the world training leaders, street vendor leaders on negotiation skills. And there is a whole process where we see like organizations that are that have majority of women, but that are led by men. So this is very common, but it's changing in StreetNet because we are gender we are a gender organization. We have policies that ensure women participation, but we have to do this work of creating the capacity and empowering women so that they can take part in the negotiation. Because very easily, as we know, when the negotiation will happen, men are there sitting in the first rows and ready to negotiate. Even if many of the issues that women face in the street vending, they are not really understood as a main problem for a male leader. This happens. So we have to build this leadership on, among women. And this is one of our main focus to be able to demand. Well, and as Saloni said, nothing for us without us. This is our motto, and we call for inclusive social dialogue that reflects non-standard employment realities, representation of self-employed and informal economy workers as workers, negotiation and collective bargaining instead of forced evictions and all other kinds of exclusions, and democratic participation for all workers. And just to conclude, I would like to say that if you want to defend the democracy, what looks to me that is one of the main challenges posed to the world today, we must ensure that the poorest are represented and the underrepresented are represented, speaking about women. So social dialogue has been a hard-won achievement for workers' struggles over the centuries and cannot exclude the majority of its grassroots constituency. We have to be there. So this is my saying for today, and thanks for the space.
Thank you so much, Maira. That was excellent. And so just to draw the link, so to draw the bridge between what you've said, which is specific to street vendors, but there's also so much that I'm hearing from the platform workers space. So you talked about, the fight for recognition and legitimacy. That is a continued sort of demand that platform workers have, that we be recognized as workers, and then protections flow from that recognition. You also talked about, street vendors not being able to form unions very easily. And this is, again, something that platform workers have been saying, as well as, men taking the front seat. And we've seen that ride hailing is a very major sector in platform work, but that is a male dominated sector. And we hear those voices more often than not. So I'm very glad you said that, because there are clear links between what the Platform Work Convention and women platform workers are asking for and what StreetNet International has been asking for historically. So with that context, and thank you, Maira, for that, I now want to turn to, our next three speakers, who will talk to us a bit more about what strategies they are adopting, they have adopted, they are thinking of as we go into the ILC. And so first on, we have Giulia. Giulia is a leader from SATSAU, which is the South African Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union, which is also a member of the International Domestic Work Federation, IDWF. Following Giulia, we have Jocelyn Dubois, who's the director of the International Department at the Canadian Labour Congress. And then finally, we have a bit of a change. Instead of Sadhana, we have Saloni from IT for Change, who will be speaking to us about these sort of strategies that we can adopt. So Giulia, now's the time to put on your headphones. I know you had some trouble with that earlier, but we will turn to you now to tell us a bit more about what SATSAU has been thinking of, what your strategy is going into the ILC.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Gloria Kente. I'm from South Africa. I'm representing SATSAU and IDWF, International Domestic Workers Federation. SATSAU strategies. We are looking forward to collaborate with the trade unions, centers, to understand the issues and listen to the workers that are working on the platform, their challenges. Because those women are those workers are women, most of them. So we cannot speak about platform work without listening to the workers directly and what is affecting them. And we know that this algorithms is insecurity. There is violence, there's discrimination. So there we must build clear minds and clear demands and also positions and take them to government, because we also need to lobby with government, our governments. And we need to go to the social media, we use the social media, and we use the voice of the workers. Because if we don't use the voice of workers, we are not going to achieve. And we need to make sure that we are engaging with our government. It is very important, because if we are not engaging with the government and we engage before the conference, not engage after conference, and when they are when the government is doing the laws, we need to be there as represent the domestic workers and those domestic workers who are working in the platform. So there must be a representative from the domestic workers who must sit with the government when they make the decision about us. And we must also request those meetings with the government, us as unions, to meet with the ministries to discuss those platforms, workers' convention, line by line and issue by issue, so we can understand. And we must understand also the concerns of the government, because when we are negotiate with the government will come with the concerns of the employers or government itself. So we need to understand those concerns. But at the end, the government must also understand the reality, the day realities of the workers, especially women in the platform, domestic workers. And the dialogue is very important to make sure that the gender equality and non-discrimination are reflected in national positions and labor policies. And we need also to engage the minister, who is the ministry in the for the women's issues. We need to engage those ministers, so we can put our challenges, we can put our challenges that the platform workers are facing, and also the gender equality issues. The minister must know. And also the employment that we are discussing about of the platform, it is not regulated. It must be regulated. The companies that are hiring those workers, they need to be also in the ILC as employers, because if we go there as a government and the workers and the companies that are employing those workers that we call platform workers, we are not gonna achieve anything. And also the government need to pay attention to these growing problems, ensure that platform companies respect the labor laws, human rights, and gender equality standards. And my closing remark, platform work cannot become a space where women workers lose rights that other workers fight for over many years. The future of work must include dignity, gender equality, social protection, and collective bargaining for all workers, including platform domestic workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria. Before I turn to you, Jocelyn, I did have one question for Gloria, which is because you've been so active in the space in South Africa, is there one example you could give us? Because you talked about engaging with government as a critical area of work for unions and especially for women workers. Is there a specific example of how you've done this in South Africa that the rest of us can learn from?
In South Africa, we met with the Minister of Employment and Labor when we are dealing with the challenges, when we want to our demands to be heard by the government. We call the minister to sit down with the trade union. And also we work with COSATU, very close with COSATU. We engage COSATU to lobby the government to come and listen to the domestic workers' issues. That's why, if they are not listening to our voice, we try to have a campaigns where we're gonna go out and make noise as workers. We always attack those spaces like parliament, where those people are sitting there. They are not thinking about us workers, because as we are saying, nothing about us without us, but them, they are not listening to us. So we go there and make noise there with our posters, and the posters that are clearly make sure that our demands are heard. That is how we do that is how we make our government to listen to us in South Africa. If you don't make noise, they will never listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria. What I'm hearing from you is it is, at the end of the day, a stronger worker collective and union that is really the answer for this, and with women representation. So with that, Jocelyn, I want to turn to you. You're obviously, active in the space in Canada. It is perhaps a different context, but the issues are similar, and you've heard some of these come out from our previous speakers. So can you talk to us a bit about strategies moving forward?
Sure, thank you, and hello everyone. I'm Jocelyn Dubois. I'm the director of the international work at the Canadian Labour Congress, which is the largest national labour centre in Canada, where we represent 3 million workers across all sectors. We're considered the most representative labor organization in Canada, and as such, we participate with a full delegation to the International Labour Conference every year. My role tends to be more in where I participate in the Committee on the Application of Standards, and I have colleagues who represent in each of the committees that are thematic committees that are on each year. And I tend to coordinate as well in terms of the work between the colleagues and in the committees. So how I think we engage each year is really beyond just thinking of the ILC. It's a constant ongoing engagement with government on the issues of interest and the issues that are before the conference. Our process in terms of ILC discussions is whether it's a general discussion or standard setting, can involve many levels of engagement, not only with government, but with our affiliates, our civil society allies, and of course with the ITUC and the workers group where we advance with our governments the coordinated positions that we want to put forward in the committees. The standard setting discussions generally do offer more opportunities to meet with government, as these tend to take place over 2 years, and they have a cycle of reports that represent critical phases of the drafting and consulting on the new convention that invite more formal engagement. It also helps for us that we sit on the governing body of the ILC of the ILO. So we're there an additional 4 weeks a year in Geneva on top of the conference, where we're building the engagement with the government representatives and the employers in terms of building up the relationships, and also building the relationship with the diplomatic mission in Geneva. So all of this really helps come together in terms of advancing the issues when we're looking at the conference. But the most formal moment of engagement with government, specifically on the ILO, happens at the annual tripartite roundtable, which is held ahead of the conference each year. And it's one of the obligations governments have within the ILO, which is under Convention 144 and tripartite discussions. So for us, meeting is actually taking place tomorrow, where we'll be meeting with employers and governments, and all of my colleagues who are the representatives on the committees will be presenting the worker positions. We'll be identifying the gaps in the office documents, and hearing from our government representatives and employers on their positions, which we will again take back to the broader ITUC and worker group allies to share government positions, which need to be really well known as we strategize on the ground in the various committees where governments are coming from and where we can try to influence them when we're at the conference. Since our worker delegation to Geneva is limited each year, we only have 5 people attending. We take advantage of this particular roundtable to invite representatives from our affiliates to participate. It's their opportunity to take part in the ILO process and the ILC, where often we have maybe 12 to 15 people participating, and they tend to, be picking based on the thematic interests. And I can share that we have a lot of interest in the platform economy discussion this year. We have a few affiliates who are also attending as observers to the conference to be able to participate and bring forward concerns to the discussion. But in terms of the preparation ahead of the conference, in terms of engaging with government, my colleagues on both the platform economy and on the transformative agenda discussion do informal outreach. So we find out who are the representatives from government who will be participating in each committee, and they've already held informal meetings with them to reach out, to share positions, to get some feedback, to develop the relationship well ahead of the time, so that we're not scrambling on the ground in Geneva at the conference to say who do I need to be speaking to. We know all of that ahead of time. We've had some outreach so that we can land on the ground quite ready for the developments, to be able to be reactive and responsive to developments, and to reach out strongly with our government representatives. And also ahead of this process, we meet regularly with the NGO and human rights experts at various government departments, both in Geneva, and we've been very active at the UNCSW in New York, which has been very instrumental in helping us situate sort of the discussion in the broader context of what we're seeing and what was been mentioned about the global pushback against gender equality, the anti-gender movement, which we've seen already take place within the ILO in the governing body as well, the pushback around anti-gender language, gender-inclusive language, sorry, and then of course the connections with the authoritarian governments, the geopolitical alignments that take place within the conference and within the broader ILO itself, the influence of the religious right, and also how we're navigating the fiscal crisis facing the multilateral system, how this is influencing the ILO itself, and how the alignments are forming within the ILC itself. And we find that these informal relationships help strengthen the discussions at the ILO, because it allows us to identify shared priorities, build trust, build collaboration, and we need that when we get there, because, as I said, on the ground, the negotiations require strategy and discipline and government support. And our lead negotiator in each of the each of the committees needs to know where the government stand, and so what we know what we need to defend and what we might need to compromise on to continue to have support moving forward in the negotiations. And currently, we have a very strong relationship with our government. We're fortunate in that way for us, but we've had experiences with not so supportive or welcoming governments that we've had to navigate as well in the past. Ahead of the conference and throughout the year, we engage our affiliates with the CLC Women's Committee, where we do a lot of prep work around the ILO, for instance. Part of the contribution to the discussion for us and how we engage government is in the submitting of the comments to the annual cycle of reports governments need to report on in terms of the convention cycle. So last year we did some comments and some good work around submitting comments on the Equal Remuneration Convention, on the Violence and Harassment Convention, which also is a moment for us to engage with government and to identify gaps or situations where we feel the government needs to be more responsive or active on these issues. In drafting these comments, we consult heavily with our affiliates. We collect their input and experiences on, the key barriers to gender equality, and as well as we promote the identify and promote the successes. And we find that these stories can come in handy when we're making the case for priorities in the committees. And often some of the specific areas that we're discussing in these committees, particularly, around issues, for both the platform and the gender transformative committees, we look at things like childcare, employment equity, pay equity, the harassment and violence issues. And all of these issues are not just standalone issues that we discuss at the ILC. I mean, these are issues that are represented in our domestic campaigns, in our advocacy materials, in our consultations with government, our submissions to government, whether it's submissions that we're talking about on budget submissions, on trade submissions, on various things. We tend to promote our positions on these issues in a broad variety of materials to government. And as I'd mentioned, just engaging on these issues at every moment allows us to build our voice and build our trust and build our position with government throughout various venues that lends us to, I think, have better access and have strong positions with them when it comes to the ILC. So it's a full-on engagement, not just, the one time where we meet ahead of the meeting. And that on the ground, as I said, each committee member is fully engaged with the government, and then we do coordinating on the ground so that we know if something is said in the platform economy that has relevance to the gender equality committee, that we're sharing information, that we're sharing, how we can, approach and influence governments right on the ground. It's very responsive, very reactive, very engaged, and it's so important on the ground to have that coordination. And of course, as I said, with our broader working group and the ITUC. And then I think just the sort of final note is that it's not just preparing for the ILC that's important, but it's what we bring back and what we bring back to our members to promote and advance the outcomes of the ILC committees. So whether that's pushing for the government for ratification of a convention. I think one of our best campaigns that we've had recently was the work around the C-190 on the violence and harassment convention, where our affiliates really engaged in that, and we really engaged in very big, strong political lobbying to get Canada to ratify that convention. And now, of course, the work we're doing around that is very much to get the effective implementation of the convention moved forward. So I guess my point about government engagement is really that it's constant, it's ongoing, it's through very many avenues, and but in terms of the more formal approaches and the specificity of the ILC, then we do a lot on the ground. And as I said, the meeting we have tomorrow is very critical in terms of that engagement. So I'll just leave it there, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to speak further.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Thank you for walking us through your process, but also talking to us about, beyond the ILC and taking back from the ILC, and that government engagement is constant. And I think it goes back to something that Gloria was saying as well. Right before I turn to our last speaker, I did want to ask you one thing, which is that I know that the ILC is very full on, it's very hectic when you're there. But for people here, we have StreetNet, we have IDWF, we have other, worker representatives. What is the best way to say engage with you? What are the best 1 or 2 ways that we can make sure that what we are discussing in our, groups and committees is also being fed back to you?
Well, I think there are key areas where there is the worker group meetings, which are the full worker group meetings are held every 2 days. And I think having access to some of these meetings might be helpful. But I think for us, identifying who are our representatives, so the Canadian worker representative in the room, that are accessible. So people can reach out directly to understand and engage and to promote their position, not only with the individual worker representatives, but there is the worker chairperson who is the key spokesperson. So I think there are the working groups for the committees that offer opportunity to have those conversations and that outreach. And as I said, getting to know, I think your country representative, whoever is the ideal person to reach out to in terms of the worker groups. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much for that. And with that, I will turn to our last speaker, Saloni from IT for Change. If you can bring us back to sort of the more socio-technical ideas of platforms themselves, Saloni. They're a very specific architecture, and they operate in very specific ways, which influences ideas of social dialogue, collective bargaining, the way they influence gender relations at work, outside work, within these collective bargaining spaces. That matters when we, propose our amendments, propose our language, propose our demands to the ILC. So if you can bring us back to that sort of conversation and how to engage most effectively with this specific platform architecture at the ILC, but also beyond, that would be helpful.
Yes. Thank you so much, Saloni. If my presentation could just be put up, that would, okay, great. Thanks, Prima.
Bruna, we can't see the screen yet. It just says loading. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Saloni. I'm a researcher at IT for Change. And as was mentioned in my introduction, I'm going to talk about gender dispossession in the platform economy mainly, and more importantly, the policy pathways that I think can address this really, really pressing issue. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I want to start with a framing that we at IT for Change have been developing for quite a while. We call it a socio-technical lens. And the idea behind this is that we refuse to treat social and technical as separate siloed conversations. This is because platform companies often use data-driven logic to pull as much value possible from workers, especially female workers. And it is the same logic that is now increasingly showing up in the digital welfare state. So you cannot understand the one without the other, essentially, in that only when you see them as a single unified system, a socio-technical assemblage, can we speak about designing a real policy response. For instance, we see how platform companies use algorithmic management, like very strict targets or rigid rating systems and surveillance to extract the maximum labor possible. And this usually happens without any redressal mechanisms. And the state is now doing something very similar, where it has also become an agent in this process, and it has outsourced its core welfare functions to private actors who obviously are more in tune with profit rather than meaningful inclusion. And now we have, resulting from this dual phenomena, is a very unique kind of gender dispossession, where women at the one hand are pushed into precarity, and in the other are denied social protection because the welfare architecture has completely changed and does not recognize their rights at all. So it's a very holistic structural system of dispossession. Next slide, please. I don't want to dwell too much on the problems because I think the speakers before me have really shed light on it. I want to talk now about the policy pathways forward. So our main demand is that if the problem is socio-technical in nature, then the policy response also has to be integrated. It has to bring together strands from social policy, economic policy, and digital policy. In the platform context, social policy basically means extending foundational labor protections to all workers, regardless of their gender or regardless of whether they are classified as an employee. Because we know that in a lot of global South nations currently, the foundational fight is to classify workers as workers. In fact, they're often termed as independent contractors or self-workers, like self-employed workers. And the economic policy focuses on shifting the cost of social security away from workers and onto the platform companies that at the end of the day benefit and profit from it. And the digital policy means recognizing that algorithms and the welfare systems are actually sites of labor governance, and they need to be regulated through the lens of labor as well, and should not be sort of put into the peripheries as purely technical or purely welfare matters. And I think right now at the ILC, often these conversations are happening separately, conversations on gender equality, on platform work, and even social dialogue. They're treated as three separate tracks, but I think so far the point I'm trying to bring through is that they share a very common root. So I think our job is also to keep them connected. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I just want to give a sense of what these policies look like in practice. On digital policy, we need more holistic data governance. Now, this means establishing something that we call at ITFC red lines, or hard prohibitions or limitations on what algorithms are allowed to do. For instance, automated deactivation without any independent review, or some sort of behavioral nudging that pushes women to overwork because they have certain care responsibilities, or wage suppression that is directly built into the algorithmic design, are some of the things that happen rampant, but we believe should function as red lines. And to counter these, the pathway forward for us, I think, should be worker co-creation, in that we must embed the worker at every stage of design and recognize them as political actors who have legitimate control and legitimate authority over the system that controls their lives. So many platforms do not even build their own algorithms. They, for example, plug in pre-built software packages that were never intended for that business model. So this obviously raises a lot of questions, but mainly that who is responsible when these systems discriminate or dispossess women? And currently that accountability is sort of fragmented, and we don't really know who the person behind the wheel is. And the social policy sector is something that I think sort of ties the digital and technical together, in that we argue for redesigning protection so that they actually account for time poverty and unpaid care work, which is something that is very gendered. Currently, digital systems function on ignoring both of these. And for example, the issue of surge pricing in ride-hailing apps, even though it is a male-dominated sector, we see how something like surge pricing rewards work during peak hours. And so women who cannot work in these hours because they're engaged in several care activities like picking up their children or caring for the elderly at home, they end up working more hours just to make up for this loss. And the situation is really dire in cases where women are sole breadwinners for their households because they cannot they cannot afford to refuse these peak hours even when it's unsafe. So the algorithm being ignorant to all of this is something that should be brought in the social policy. Maternity leave is another gap. Currently, some governments are extending social protection through something called monotax mechanisms, where workers basically pay their own contributions. So this sort of fills the very immediate need, but at the end of the day, it puts the financial burden on women workers and not on the platforms. So we propose that platform companies do have a duty of care regardless of the employment status. And these social security schemes must be financed by mandatory contributions from the platforms themselves rather than the workers. And on economic policy, the idea is to reclaim digital industrial stewardship, something that I'll talk about in the next slide as well, where basically the state investment needs to shift towards infrastructure that create decent and dignified work. And this obviously maintains mandating the platform to fulfill certain kind of obligations. And this could include things like registration to enforcing data sharing about the workforces that they employ. But the main theme through all these three sectors is that gender justice requires economic policy that funds care infrastructure. Social policy is required to guarantee rights along the entire life cycle, including maternity and care leave. And digital policy is required to make sure that the system is co-created by workers and it's not a top-down model. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. So just want to bring up the socio-technical pathways for a second, because we are moving beyond just regulating the existing platform economy. We are talking about also building an alternative. And I'm sure many of us already know that alternative architectures already exist, in that there are platform cooperatives, there are no commission models which are collectively governed. And we also see the rise of these worker-owned cooperatives in Brazil and Spain. So this basically shows that the design is available and designs around dignity and meaningful inclusion are present, but we do need some help in making these models grow at scale and to displace the current extractive ones. For this, the main purpose of states is to move away from a laissez-faire posture to step into its role as what we call a steward for industrial policy, which means three things: mainly public financing, which is reorienting state investment towards publicly funded and locally controlled infrastructures, and breaking the dependence away from venture capital models that demand a kind of data fee. Secondly, to provide some legislative supports, because financial subsidies and technical help is very, very crucially needed for cooperatives to adopt platform models who otherwise lack the relevant know-how. And third is to revamp competition, antitrust, and taxation framework so that local and worker-first alternatives have some room to grow and some room to breathe. But I just want to close my section with the strategic moment that we are in, where we have this active opportunity in the form of ILC. And we must make sure that all sectors, domestic workers, platform workers, formal trade unions, and feminist civil society organizations, we have our interests aligned. And I think the task is to make sure that these interests are addressed together. So at the global level, we need a strong ILO convention that guarantees women in micro work and platform-based services have access to higher standards of labor protection, especially women in micro work, because they are often rendered invisible because of very complicated subcontracting agreements. And these are the women who are doing content moderation, data annotation, and are actually training the large language models and are often exposed to violent and harmful content. So this is where we need occupational safety safeguards. And we also should push for a new international standard on automated work management, which has become the guiding hand in a lot of newer workplace arrangements, and one that has a gendered approach to privacy and a real commitment to eliminating algorithmic discrimination. And often recruitment algorithms that penalize women who have taken, for example, career breaks or breaks for care work, these concerns are addressed. So the new standard must apply to work settings regardless of the way that they are the way that they are operationalized. And at the national level, I think the demands should first be to enforce the ILO conventions on equal remuneration on domestic workers and violence. Because we see that platform workers are often rendered without safeguards, even in developed nations. And we must look at training labor departments to spot the right violations in feminized and informal subcontracting chains, where women's work is routinely made invisible. And on coalition building, as we were talking about before, we need very coordinated and strategic alliances with trade unions and social movements and global worker collectives, in that all holding national delegations accountable, and to make sure that gender equality positions are carried through every platform work negotiation, and to make sure that social dialogue frameworks are opened to organizations that represent the most marginalized workers. Another thing to flag out is that in India specifically, traditional unions sometimes assume platform workers are just passing through, because mainly the people employed are students or migrant workers looking to make an extra income. But for many workers, and especially for women workers, platform work has been their daily bread and butter. Some have been working for more than 10 years in these arrangements. So that deserves representation, and even traditional union structures need to recognize that platform work is not temporary. So basically, the thing that I started with is the assemblage of this socio-technical structure of disposition was built by very, very coordinated choices by different actors, by private corporations, by states, by technical designers, and addressing it from our end, from progressive forces, also requires similar kind of coordination over time and across movements. So I think ILC being with that one movement in the larger arc, we must keep our efforts coordinated. Thank you.
Great.
And
Great.
obviously open to questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, you touched upon a lot of things that our previous speakers have said, but I won't sort of go too much into it because we will spend some time on questions now. So the floor is open for anyone who would like to raise their hand. I see there is something from Graciela already, which I can start posing to the speakers. And for the speakers, I'm not going to do specific questions for each speaker. So if you'd like to speak to something, that'll be great. So Graciela asks all of you, what has been the most effective strategy? And maybe Jocelyn, this is relevant to you particularly. What has been the most effective strategy for influencing governments before negotiations formally begin? Gloria did talk about this a bit, but that's a question that Graciela does raise. We also have a question on what does meaningful participation actually look like for workers in informal employment within social dialogue processes? Maira, maybe something here for you to add. And on gender representation, what has worked so far to change gender imbalances and within sort of workers' organizations? Those are three questions that Graciela has raised. If anyone would like to come in on anything, now's the time.
Thanks, Eleni. I can go ahead in terms of the effective strategies. I think that really, in terms of influencing negotiations, really what's very important is the I think building trust. So I think it's not just going to government at one point and saying we want you to do this. It's the fact that we've been building and working on these issues for a long, long time, and we have built those relationships with government so that when we do go see them, they know where we're coming from, they know who we are. So I think, as I said, it's an ongoing engagement that is something that is really builds that basis for when we're specifically talking about ILC issues. And also, as other colleagues have mentioned, when you bring the voice of a broader movement. So when we speak, and we're speaking not only on our own perspectives, but we can say we're very much representing the voice of our members, or, we're working closely with our civil society allies, that this is not just a, one person or one organization, but that we're very representative, and that we have, when we speak, we're speaking with that authority, and we're speaking with a voice of trust. So I think, thinking about it beyond just the one specific negotiation, but of, long-term building and engagement is critical.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Before I come to you, Tatiana, and yeah, I wanted to ask if anyone else wants to respond to that. Julia, I see you.
Thank you. On the first question on the strategy with governments, I'm very, very much with Jocelyn. What we have been doing for this conference is to talk to, more technically, when it comes to the conference, you tend to speak to groups of governments, so the European Union, GRULAC for the Americas, but also to individual governments. And the way CLC has been working is the perfect example, to build trust. So that is a permanent dialogue. And then when the conference comes in, you kind of need to fine-tune your messages to that specific context, but they know, and they also appreciate, in my experience, the fact that we come in early on, so that we kind of help them to define their strategy. Obviously, the fact that we are membership-based give also them strength when they stand and when they support our messages. I think it's also important to talk to governments that are not allies. In some cases, it's very difficult, but in my experience, I've been told, "Oh, you're preaching to the converted," which is always important. But at the same time, finding the middle ground. There are some governments that will never, when we ask for a meeting as ITUC, some governments just don't want to meet with us because the political distance is too big. But those governments in between, and when it comes to gender equality, there are some governments that also want to be seen as progressive, even if then there is a big contradiction at the national level. So we also leverage that to open up the perspectives. So we will not agree on everything. Probably we will disagree on most of it, but at least we bridge perspectives, and they know what our priorities are about. And that helps also for us to understand where their priorities come from, especially when they're rooted in strong cultural, religious positions. That's very sensitive, And we do have also unions in those countries reflecting those views. So it's a difficult exercise, but I think it's very useful. I would leave the question on informal employment maybe to Maira. On the question on gender imbalance inside workers' organizations, that's a topic for another webinar. In a nutshell, at the ITUC since, I think, 2009-10, we have been having specific programs for women in leadership. So the current one is called Women in Leadership, WIL, and we train every year women. We try to have young women that are proposed by the unions at the national level, so that we train them in terms of content on policy, but also speaking in public, like very concrete issues that are helpful for them to become leaders. And we also ask unions to make pledges so that they will move on in terms of, for example, having quotas in their executive committee so that at least 40% of the executive committee must be held by women. And we have good examples, but there is still a long way to go. And we are working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia. So what I'm hearing from Jocelyn and Giulia is that, it has to be engaged. It can't just be, IELTS is here and so we engage. It has to be a more sustained relationship with the state, and also particularly what you said, Giulia, with those who may not be allies. Maira, coming to you, there was a question on what does meaningful participation look like within social dialogue, but also maybe you want to touch upon some others as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was thinking about how to speak about that, and I was thinking that, I think we have to think in all the levels, from the bottom, what means a real participation of informal economy workers would be like that anything related to their lives and work would be a matter of negotiation. And they would at least be considered to be heard, to be involved. This is the very least. We can say that the workers achieved throughout the centuries the right to be at the table. But this right is not extended to informal economy workers. So the country level, country level, we could say that any negotiation table that exists, I mean, the meaning of having a negotiation table is the understanding that the government has to intermediate the interest of the capital, the private sector, and the workers, that they would not naturally agree. So the government should regulate and should mediate. So this would be the first understanding. Like, if informal economy workers are suffering without rights, being exploited, without mediation, without regulation, there should be a space of participation where these interests, workers' interests, rights interests, and capital interests would somehow be in a negotiation, in a dialogue, to reach a common ground, let's say. But we have the problem of underrepresentation in the labor movement. So maybe this idea, when I hear we can maybe mirror the women's experience of ensuring quotas for some years, for some time, until that the reality of trade union leaders are reflecting the actual distribution of population, like men and women half. So if we ensure quotas in a few years, then we will have men and women leading trade unions. And the same for informal economy workers. But for this, they need at least before to be recognized as workers, to be able to form trade union centers and not only civil society associations. So the government must ensure that, and also trade unions must open their mindset, their own structure to recognize informal economy workers. And speaking about ILO, what would be really have a representation there? We know ILO is the only United Nations space where there is tripartism. So one row of workers, governments, capital. And then on these workers' seats, we don't have informal economy workers really represented. So if we are the 60%, how we can change that? So this is something. So when we speak about having participation, have a voice, having legitimacy, being legitimized, is about that, is to really enter these spaces with a voice and a say in all the decisions.
Thank you, Maira. Those are very thoughtful responses. Tatiana, sorry, your hand's been up for a while, so I'm coming to you now for your question.
Hola. Mira, disculpa, estoy desde el teléfono de Tatiana, pero soy Patricia Coñomán, de Chile. Ya se me echó a perder el celular, así que, pero no importa, siempre existe la solidaridad que te presten un teléfono. Mira, tengo una enorme preocupación. Yo soy presidenta del sindicato Sintradom en Chile, del Sindicato Nacional de Trabajo en Domicilio, y claro, escucho la expositora y tengo mucho que argumentar. Primero, por lo menos en mi país, en las organizaciones de trabajo en domicilio, pese a que tenemos sindicatos, ya no estamos representadas es lo que significa hoy día toda la plataforma digital, ya por nuestro propio trabajo. Somos trabajadoras dentro de nuestros hogares, se nos confunde generalmente con las casas particulares, pero la verdad es que yo voy como delegada y la verdad es que creo que se hace necesario y urgente que otros grupos de compañeras y compañeros que estén en la misma condición, que no estamos en las plataformas, que nos podamos reunir para también tener una propia plataforma de cómo ideamos y cómo hacemos un trabajo a futuro. Porque la verdad es que yo no puedo dejar de estar de acuerdo con las plataformas, pero cuando me toca a mí, me pregunto, cuando le toca a nuestros trabajadores, a nuestras trabajadoras, y claro, nosotros queremos salir de la invisibilidad al trabajo formal, nos gustaría, pero no hay ninguna puerta que se abra para que nos permitan a nosotros también hacer políticas más grandes a nivel nacional, internacional, latinoamericana, que yo creo que América Latina es una de las que está muy afectada, no solamente por nuestro trabajo, sino con el avance también político que hay en nuestros gobiernos, que nos están quitando derechos con los pocos que hemos avanzado. Entonces, yo sugiero que dentro de las reuniones que se van a efectuar podamos hacer una reunión en que nosotras podamos expresar nuestra opinión, expresar lo que estamos sintiendo, lo que hoy día nos pasa y que nos quedamos afuera de todas las negociaciones que haya con plataformas. Porque no podemos, ¿dónde? Entonces, me gustaría, y hago esa sugerencia, que por favor veamos antes de la reunión de la OIT o del CIT, que podamos realmente hacer una reunión que nos permita también ayudar a otras de que conozcan nuestra experiencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Patricia, and also Tatiana for allowing Patricia to participate. That is a very critical question, and I see Shirley's question, which is somewhat related on the chat. How can we get external help to push our agendas forward because we are struggling? I will take that as combine those two and take that as the last question for our speakers. Very quick responses if anyone wants to come in.
Well, just quickly, I think that this often speaks to the notion of global solidarity. I think that one of the things that we tend to do also at the ILC is we can ask our governments if they're on side with us to put pressure through their own groupings, so geographical or otherwise groupings, and speak to other governments in terms of trying to get them on side or trying to get them to align more with the positions that are trying to be pushed forward by the government. So I think that as workers, we can often do that as well. We can lobby our governments, and identify perhaps more resistant governments and ask for that kind of support to move forward. In terms of national level lobbying, I think that when there are moments to have regional or international supports, that can help sometimes dislodge some of the resistance if we can pull that together. I think that so it speaks to me to international coordination, international solidarity.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I know it was a very hard question, so thank you for taking that. Anyone else? Shirley agrees. She says we do need that global solidarity, so that's good. Right. If there's no one else, I will come in with also some WIGO commitments. So we've been sort of committed to bridging this gap between informal work, which we've been so historically embedded in supporting workers, to also now, bridge this divide, this artificial divide really between workers on and off platforms, but who really operate in very informal conditions. So we will be at the ILC, and as we go, we've drafted a statement which is open for endorsements. I'm just going to leave a link to that here. We have about 18 co-signatories right now, and really we're pushing for the convention to respond to all workers, regardless of their classification within platforms, particularly own account or self-employed workers. We need rights and protections for all. So if you would like to co-sign the statement, just scroll down to the bottom and you will see how you can do that. Alongside, and also Patricia, this is responding to you, at the ILC, we will have a delegation which will be led by Pat Horn, who some of you may know, and we will be convening a morning caucus. So if you'd like to be part of that, please reach out to me. But also taking something from what you said, Jocelyn, is that the fight is not just at the ILC, it is beyond. So from our end at WeGo, we do want to come back as a delegation and as an organization from ILC, debrief workers' committees, workers' groups as to what happened there, but also what next. Because this is a larger question. The ILC is critical, as Saloni said, but it is also just one moment, and the fight has to be more engaged beyond that particular moment, and we need to draw from that and strengthen our local, advocacy work. So, if you would like to sort of be engaged, please do follow follow us, our social medias. You can reach out to me anytime if as a workers group you would like to engage with us. And yes, I'm glad there will be some engagement at the debrief, Helen. Thank you for that comment. But right, that is all. Thank you very much to our speakers. This was the last webinar in our series right up to the ILC, but we will continue this, like I said, as a debrief later. And very much looking forward to engaging with you, in the next few weeks, but also beyond. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.